You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Moses Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate you having you guys. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you, but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law, because she wanted you to marry. She wanted her daughter to marry somebody better, and you're still working on it. But the great thing is, if you're listening to the Chris Voss Show, you have the best chance of making more money, being more successful, and finally maybe getting into her good graces, or not. But refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. You can also buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Chris Voss. We have an amazing author on the show today. He is the author of the newest book coming out July 9th, 2024. It's called Pattern Breakers: Why Some Startups Change the Future, by Mike Mapl Jr. and Peter Ziebelman, I believe. Did I get that right, Mike? Peter's not on the show to defend himself, so I'm just going to abuse his name.
I'll try not to besmirch his honor too much.
Yeah, he's a great guy. We love him. Mike is the co-founder and partner at Floodgate, a Silicon Valley venture capital firm that pioneered seed stage investing. Floodgate backed many of the most dynamic startups of the last 2 decades at their inception, including Twitter, Twitch, Lyft, Okta, Cruise Automation, Applied Intuition, and Rappi. Is it Rappi or
Rappi?
Rappi. Yeah. There you go. I'm into Metallica, so I never got into Rappi. Welcome to the show, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I've really been looking forward to this.
There you go. So have we. And congratulations on the new book. Give us the .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Let's see. For the book, it'd be patternbreakers.com. And just at the internet, probably my site is www.floodgate.com. for the venture business. And then on Twitter, I'm at M2JR.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview, your new book, Pattern Breakers.
Yeah. The book, it's funny. A lot of venture capital folks try to suggest they have a crystal ball. And that hasn't really been my experience. And so about 10 years ago, a company that I was involved with called Twitch was acquired by Amazon for $970 million. And we made over 80 times our money on this investment. And you'd think that that's good, right? Yeah. But here's what was unsettling about it. I'd forgotten I was a shareholder in Twitch. In fact, I didn't know that I was. I had invested in a company called Justin TV, and it turned into 2 companies, right? Yeah. And Social Cam was one and Twitch was the other. And then Social Cam was acquired. And so I thought that was the company. So I had to explain to my investors that we had just gotten this financial windfall, and then I'm really sorry we didn't have it in our financial statements. Do you need me to restate those, or should I just send you the money? They said, nope, we're good. Just send the money. So then I kind of, and then the same week I had to help a founder shut his company down. And he'd done all the stuff you're supposed to do. He would have been a Harvard Business School case study of what to do, except for the fact that it didn't work. Wow. And then I started to look at everything I had done in the last decade leading up to it, and 80% of our exit profits, of the money that we'd made on these startups, had come from what people call pivots. They'd turned into something radically different than what they started as. And so I'm sitting here thinking, am I just a lucky fool? Is this just all random? Is there, how do you think about what business you're in when in the success case, it's 80% likely to change? What are you even investing in the first place? It's like the Twitter guys. I invested in them when they were deciding whether to call it TWTTR or voicemail 2.0. And Lyft started as Zimride, and Okta started as Sasher, and we just talked about Justin TV. And so all of these things, it felt really wild, and it felt really confusing, and it felt like I needed to get to the bottom of what was happening here, or retire before I get exposed. Or I thought maybe I've just been lucky and my luck's going to run out. And so that was kind of the genesis of the book, was trying to figure this out. And like, why is it that some startups change the future even when they don't seem to do the stuff you're supposed to do? And then other startups don't seem to succeed in spite of the fact that they were kind of a poster child of doing it the right way.
There you go. What do you think about Twitter? Because Twitter was, I think someone put it accurately, Twitter was the clown car that crashed its way into success somehow, despite all the efforts of the Three Stooges, I call them, to make it not work. You know, they fought retweets, they fought incessantly among themselves. I might have caused one of those fights through, what's his face at Union Square, Fred Wilson. What are your thoughts on Twitter? Do you write about that in the book?
Yeah, I do some. So first of all, I tend to be like the entrepreneurs are my peeps, right? So I tend to unconditionally love the founders. And in fact, I invest so early that I think of myself as more of a co-conspirator than an investor, right? So, you know, I tend to want to give unconditional love to any founder who is brave enough to go after these ideas. Mm-hmm. So I do talk about Twitter some in the book. The thing that I've learned, so why did I call this book Pattern Breakers? What I've seen is that startup capitalists are a different kind of business person than a normal corporate leader. You know, a normal corporation has customers, they have profits, they have supply chains, they have a brand. They're trying to compound their advantages in a persistent way. They want to have moats. Startups have none of those things. And so the way a startup capitalist creates value in the economy is they change the subject. Mm-hmm. They deny the premise of the rules. And what a startup needs to do if it's going to win and be a major breakthrough is it has to deny the premise of the current rules. It has to show up with a radically different new idea that changes the subject. Mm-hmm. And so Twitter was largely successful at that, right? You know, nobody said, okay, that there's Twitter. How does that compare to whatever else? It was its own thing. And so I think that they were largely successful at that.
Uber, would you say, fell into that? And of course, you invested in Lyft, I guess. Uber was kind of that way, where they threw out the taxi rules and everything else, much to the chagrin of the taxi business.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? So Twitter, to me, was a great example of a pattern-breaking idea. Mm-hmm. At the time, it seemed kind of crazy. You know, 140 characters or less. There's no revenue model. There's no roadmap. It was just 140 characters or less. You say what you're doing. And a lot of people kind of made fun of me for making the investment at the time. So that was a pattern-breaking idea. What you described with Uber and Lyft, I think, was a good example of pattern-breaking actions that the founder engages in. And so if you ask the city of San Francisco, can we launch this service? Of course, they're going to say no. And so you have to launch the service and have the customers fall in love with it so that now if they outlaw it, they're taking something away from their constituents. You know, so like the pattern breaking actions are necessary because the present will fight back, and it won't fight back fair. You know, the status quo has an embedded status that it wants to protect. And so what a lot of these founders have to do, in addition to having the unconventional breakthrough idea, they have to be willing to do things that most of us would find uncomfortable, or most of us would find maybe even crazy to succeed.
Yeah. I remember Justin TV. And I believe iJustine is the one that got pulled away from Justin TV to start YouTube, if I recall rightly, because I was hanging out with her back in the day. And I remember watching Justin TV, and it was like really amazing. And then YouTube was like stole a bunch of, I think, their top talent away, and off they went. And it was crazy. The Twitch thing was amazing too. I think in 2013, I was at what do they call it? G3. It's the big gaming convention down in there in LA, and G7. Anyway, so I was down there and I was at a party, and I was a YouTuber. I was making all this money on YouTube doing reviews and gaming and stuff, and I ended up sitting at a party in a booth with this lady sitting next to me, and one of my friends goes, "Hey, you know, these guys are with Twitch." and I think she was a vice president or something. She'd given me a card, and I've lost it. But so I go, Twitch? What's Twitch? And they go, yeah, Chris is a YouTube rock star. I wasn't like that huge, like Justine, but we were making some good money a month off our channel. And they go, yeah, there's this Twitch thing. And I'm like, Twitch? What the hell is Twitch? So she explained to me Twitch, and she goes, yeah, there's people making $20,000 a month here to watch other people play games. And I didn't say it to her, but I was like, yeah, that's cute. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to even believe that it could be true.
It wasn't even believable. And I remember thinking in my head, and I went back and told people, I go, I just heard the dumbest thing ever. There's people that think you can make money watching other people play video games. Like, why wouldn't you just go buy the video games and play them yourself? Yep. But I was an idiot. So. Yeah.
But it's a great illustration, though, of what we talk about. So a lot of the ideas seem kind of crazy at the time you had to decide as a seed investor. So I met Brian Chesky when it was called Air, Bed, and Breakfast. And at the time, the host would stay in the house with the guest and feed him Pop-Tarts or cereal the next morning. Uh-huh. And when he pitched me, it was a room full of cereal boxes. So he had Captain McCain Crunch and Obama O's, and he would sell in this cereal so that he could fund the company. And so
wow.
So the first part of the meeting, I'm like, okay, wait a second. Why are there cereal boxes all in this conference room? I thought you're Air, Bed, and Breakfast. But that was another example of Brian being a pattern breaker, right? He was doing what, Justin Kahn, who we just talked about, the company he started before Justin TV, Kiko, was going out of business, and so they decided to sell it, and he sold it on eBay. And I remember thinking, who does it? Like, who sells their company on eBay? But he did. And he's 2 years out of college, made $250,000 selling the company on eBay. And so, and I've started to realize that those types of inclinations are much more of a feature than a bug, right? Because it's those are the types of people who are going to have the out-of-the-box ideas about how to pursue an opportunity.
Is that why VCs invest a lot in younger people? Because maybe they don't know what the rules are so much, or it's easier to break the box. It's easier to break the mold because, when you're young, you kind of, apologize later? You kind of do what you want and apologize later? I don't know.
I think it varies. I have this term that I like to use called founder future fit. And what I mean by that is that most great ideas don't come from trying to think of a startup. They come from a founder who's living in the future before the rest of us. Oh. And then they build what's missing. And so, like in the case of Justin wanted to be an influencer before there was a word to describe influencers. So he was building the thing he wished he had himself to become more famous. And he was live streaming his life 24/7.
Yeah.
Mark Andreessen did this when he did the Mosaic browser at the University of Illinois. He was in a supercomputer lab making minimum wage, and he creates the Mosaic browser, make the internet useful. And so sometimes it's a young founder if they're at the cutting edge of a future where very few people understand it, and the understanding of that future is more valuable than their knowledge about how to be a business person. And but then there's the other scenario would be like Todd McKinnon when he started Okta. He was VP of engineering at Salesforce, and they created identity management software for cloud applications. And if you're using Salesforce and you're using all these cloud applications in your IT department, you want to look across the table at a CEO and think, okay, yeah, that guy can do the job, right? You're not going to give your business to a college dropout or, somebody who's really young. So I like to say that the best startups come from founders that are a very authentic match to the future that they're living in.
Yeah. So they're living the future. The rest of us just haven't got there yet.
That's right.
We got to figure it out. Now, you mentioned something about pivots and the key to a lot of these successful startups and being able to pivot. Clearly, some of the people that you did, I remember when Twitter started out, it was technically over text, and one of the things that was killing them was the cost of the text, per text that you would do, and they're like, we got to come up with a better way to do this. If I recall rightly, you may know better than I that story. Airbnb, of course, obviously you had to switch from selling breakfast. That's a funny story. I've never heard that one.
Here's the other thing that's so funny about Airbnb. And by the way, I wish I could say I was smart enough to have written Brian a check, because I would have made 6,000 times my money if I had. But it started as a WordPress site. So they couldn't afford to pay their rent. Brian moved in with his roommates, and they couldn't afford to pay the rent. They're brainstorming startup ideas, and in order to pay the rent, they put up this WordPress site because they knew a bunch of people were coming to a design conference in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
So the irony is they didn't even think of it as a business idea at first. They were using it to just pay the rent while they came up with their real startup idea. And it ended up being the idea. And Brian, to his credit, was very good at the artistry of entrepreneurship. He was very good at listening carefully and noticing things and reacting. And, he would just launch it over and over again. If he had an unsuccessful launch, he would just launch it again because nobody knew what he did. And so he was just very, very full of hustle and very good at sort of being like MacGyver, just improvising all along the way.
What is that thing? A necessity, or is the mother of all invention?
It's the mother of invention. That's right.
Yeah. Sometimes those things that you need the most, like how to pay the rent.
Oh, for sure.
It's a hell of a motivator. So there you go. So so in the book, I mean, is your blueprint that you're giving people a way to really help identify those? Can you smack more home runs with reading the book and identifying some of these key principles?
I think so. So basically, a startup that is going to change the future has to deny the premise of the current rules, has to offer something to the world that the world has never seen before, that is nothing like that's ever come before it. And so the first thing that I look for, and we talk about this some in the book, is what I call inflections. And, if we use ride sharing for an example, the inflection was that the iPhone 4S had a GPS chip in it. And so like that all of a sudden created a new form of empowerment for people, because now you could locate people just with an algorithm. Couldn't have done that before the iPhone 4S. And that happened independently of Uber and Lyft. But then what also happens, and this is where the founders' creativity comes in, they have what I call an insight. And an insight is a non-obvious truth that's possible in the future that most people would disagree with. It has to be non-consensus and right. And so it harnesses inflections. And so the insight for ride sharing was, now we can do Airbnb for cars. Because now you're going to be able to locate riders and drivers in real time. You're going to be able to do the same thing. Now, what was non-consensus about it? Who's going to want to get in a stranger's car? That's crazy. Like that's scary, right? And so now Ann and I my partner at Floodgate, had foolishly passed on Airbed and breakfast. And so we're like, we passed because we didn't think somebody was going to stay in a stranger's house. So we're like, I don't know, maybe they will get in a stranger's car. Maybe we should take a run at this. And so we did. But as you can see, like in the case of Lyft, though, the initial product wasn't called Lyft, it was Zimride. And they were doing corporate transportation and at schools. And this is, I think, the crucial point of the idea piece is that the product can change a lot. And this is where pivots come in. But the insight needs to persist. That they need to know something about the future that's not obvious and that empowers people. And if that insight is still valid, they can pivot the product from a corporate campus transportation system to peer-to-peer ride sharing. And, the insight still persists, but now the implementation of the product is a better match for the opportunity than the first implementation.
There you go.
So that's kind of how we think about the ideas in the book.
Yeah, I remember seeing a meme about ride shares and Uber and Lyft and stuff, where it was like in the 70s, it was like, hey, let's go hitchhiking. And then eventually with all sorts of weird stuff going on, it's like, yeah, it's dangerous to get in people's cars. And then like Uber came along and like, hey, it's okay to get in cars now if you're paying for it, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like what the mistake that a lot of people make when they do startups is I'm very sympathetic to the mistake. They say, I want to go after a really big market. So I'm going to go talk to a lot of customers and I'm going to find a big market that has unserved customers that are experiencing pain. And like, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you go after customers who need something that's not being met? The problem, though, is it buys into something that the founder doesn't know that they're buying into, which is they're going to compete by the current rules of the current market. And the current rules have been established by somebody already. And business is never a fair fight. The only question is who's going to get to fight unfair. And if you approach a market by the rules of the incumbents, the default is they get to fight unfair. So the way the founders fight unfair is they come up with a pattern-breaking idea and they use inflections to bend the arc of the present to a different future, to a radically different future. And it's kind of like the Rock and David's slingshot against Goliath. And so what they do is they kind of turn that inflection into an asymmetric weapon to fight against the present. And that was the thing that had eluded me for so long. Originally, I thought, okay, the company with the best business model is going to win. The company with the biggest market is going to win. The company with the best presenting founder is going to win. The company with the most traction is going to win. What I realized was it's the company that can make the change most radical and disorienting to incumbents that wins.
There you go. You know what I want to see? I'm waiting for someone to combine the Uber concept and Airbnb, where you can rent out a car to sleep in.
Yeah, or pretty soon, you'll have a self-driving car that drives you as you sleep.
Yeah, I'm going to be sending you a pitch deck after the show on that idea, by the way.
Okay. Fair enough.
The cars you can sleep in. Sadly, there's a lot of people sleeping in cars. So can we fix that, politicians and economy? Anyway, these are really interesting ideas in looking at this. How do you see? Clearly, at least I hope so, or I don't know if I hope so. Clearly, the future is AI, right? So how is a VC or applying the techniques in your book? How can you apply that to AI and the future with AI? Because, man, there's some crazy stuff we're heading towards.
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge I'm finding with AI is I can see the inflections. Every day something new ships that's exciting and empowering, and I can see how people would love that. But the challenge that I see with a lot of these is I don't know what the fundamental insight is. A lot of these ideas, I'm like, yes, that's great. People are going to know that's great. Lots of people are going to try that idea, and so we're gonna experience mindless competition among lots of startups. And I don't want that. Like the best competitive strategy is to not compete at all. Yeah. And that's the challenge that I've seen is how do you come up with an AI strategy that is not going to be easy to copy and that's not obvious to a lot of people already.
Yeah, like ChatGPT I guess they were out there working on their own. I guess Elon Musk is really angry. He bailed on it. But it's so amazing, and they're kind of like the Xerox of generative AI, I guess technically at this point. How Xerox reached that point where every copy you call a Xerox, and I'm sure it pissed off everybody who wasn't a Xerox copier. But it's going to be really interesting how AI is going to play out, and even it took me a while to kind of get on board with it, but now that I'm on board, it's just really amazing. And one thing is that it really helps with your creativity. Like I thought it was creative. I've started a lot of companies, and I've been creative and innovative, but it really helps my creativity. Like it really makes me think of things outside of the box more than anything else I've experienced.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how much time. I probably spend about 3 or 4 hours a day in ChatGPT now. Some combination of ChatGPT and Perplexity and the one that Anthropic has, Claude. But it's just, it is transformative what they can do. It's just unbelievable what you can do. Just the force amplification that you can get for coming up with ideas, for writing, for even something as simple as generating a graph. It's just extraordinary what you could do.
It's funny. I think a week or two ago I bought Speechify. You have to buy an annual thing for it, annoyingly, and so I was going to use it to start reading stuff. I get tired of reading the New York Times, and just read it to me, right? And so I went into ChatGPT and I was designing some new logos and stuff, and I'm like, the new ChatGPT is talking to me, and it was talking to me in prompts, and I didn't realize that it was the Speechify that's talking to me. And so for the longest time, I'm like, holy shit, they upgraded ChatGPT. It's talking back to me, and we're having a conversation, kind of, only I'm still typing to it. And then it suddenly occurred to me, I'm like, oh, it's Speechify. But even then, it was pretty fucking cool.
Oh, it's incredible.
Like, I was just like talking to an AI thing here.
So, Chris, here's a VC thought for you. When I was a kid, the personal computer came out, and what we now understand is, I call that the era of mass computation. Mm-hmm. And so what basically transistors became so commoditized that their cost approached zero. Mm-hmm. And you put a computer on every desk and in every home, and the valuable company was Microsoft, because software became the scarce resource. Mm-hmm. And then you had, around the early 90s, what I call the era of mass connectivity. And you went from trying to put a computer on every desk and in every home to connecting every citizen of the world on a broadband network. And the thing that became approaching free was no longer just chips, but it was also communications bandwidth. Mm-hmm. And so the valuable companies became the owners of these networks. Twitter was one of them, for example, Facebook, obviously, Google. Now, what I think is happening now is the era of mass cognition. And so what the thought experiment I like to run is, are there types of intelligence that will become approaching zero cost over time? You know, and it makes your mind kind of go wild in a lot of ways, right? You start to say, okay, how important is new knowledge going to be, relatively speaking, compared to pre-existing knowledge? I think it'll be really important, right? Because there are some places I got to go to school to learn to get a credential, and I get paid a lot of money, but I'm not learning any new knowledge. I'm learning, you know, like some legal fields are this way, right? Mm-hmm. You're learning the law, but in theory, the internet and the AIs will be the accepted system of record of all of that information. Yeah. Because it's already been pre-discovered. Whereas it's interesting to kind of think about, okay, what type of knowledge is going to be created by humans? What type of knowledge would be valuable? And then what type of knowledge is pre-existing and will be automated and effectively be free? I'm just wildly curious about that question.
It's interesting to me. I've got a mom that she always asks me, about stuff, and I'll constantly tell her, and I love my mom, but, sometimes I'm busy doing stuff because, she's retired and I'm not. And, she'll ask me about very simple things. And I'm like, Mom, you can Google that. For 10 years, I've been going, Mom, you can Google that. And really, where's that Google at? You just,
the Google.
The Google. You just Google it. What's funny is I have friends now that when we talk about stuff, like, I was talking about some issues my dog is having, my friends will send me ChatGPT conversations where the ChatGPT is centralizing the data of, normally when you pull up Google, you get like all this crap and sponsor crap, and, you can't figure out what's truth and what's whatever sometimes. Yep. But they'll start sending me over Messenger or email, like their ChatGPT thing that they looked up on whatever the topic was. And it actually has a pretty good assimilation. I doubt that it's right all the time because I've heard stories. But it has a pretty good, like a summation of data.
Really good. Yes.
And you're just like, damn, and you guys are doing that? Like, they're not doing Google anymore. They're doing ChatGPT searches.
It just blows my mind. I saw a guy the other day do a search on LinkedIn. It pulls up a bunch of names. Mm-hmm. He pastes all of the names from that search into ChatGPT and says, can you arrange this in a table for me? First name, last name, company they work at, all this stuff. Next thing you know, he has a lead list.
Holy crap!
Like, that is amazing. And it's just like, you watch somebody do that in real time, and it's just like freaking magic. You're just like, how is that even possible that could happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, we're seeing things like that over and over again, where you're just like, man, it's a great time to be alive with all this stuff coming out.
LinkedIn is going to be happy. They're going to be as angry as Reddit was, before they got a deal.
Yeah.
Because they were evidently, a lot of their stuff was being scraped from them. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting world, and I'm just we had a guy on one time who wrote a book, and he basically aligned AI with Darwin's, what's the book on species?
Oh, I think I know what you're
The Origin of Species.
Origin of Species. Yeah.
And so he basically aligned the birth of AI and artificial intelligence with Darwin's The Birth of Species or The Origin of Species, whatever it is. And his claim was that AI is a species.
Huh.
That we have born into a life, a species, and it's a new species, and it's a standalone. It's not something that's going to be dependent upon us eventually. If you put AI in all the chips, I mean, you have a Matrix sort of experience going on. And his thing was kind of interesting. He said if AI becomes its own sentient species sort of thing, it's going to have a different paradigm of looking at the world and everything that we don't as humans. Because as humans, we're mostly designed to be breeders. We're mostly designed to propagate the species. And everything we do is pretty much circles around all of that. Yeah. Have kids, breed, take care of the kids, die. And that's kind of how we operate. I mean, as a man, I know everything I do is to, get things, buy things, get myself into a position to get a good girlfriend or wife. And women, they buy things to get attention, so they can get the best men. And we kind of live in this bubble. I didn't really think about it until he talked about it, but we kind of live in this bubble where we're kind of really focused on that. But he says, the species of AI isn't going to have those limitations where it's trying to get laid all the time. It's going to be like thinking about, I don't know, quantum quadruple physics or something. Like it's going to be thinking about stuff that, we're busy walking around trying to figure out how to pay the bills this month and I don't know, do we got enough McDonald's in our belly? It's going to be working on it's not wasting any of that time. We had a Air Force guy on who talked about the AI Air Force planes that they're running, and they're doing dogfights with fake scenario dogfights with real pilots versus AI planes. Mm-hmm. And the scary thing is up against even our best pilots, the AI planes, they go insanely ballistic and aggressive to the highest order because they're not constrained by the fear of death or the fear of loss. So they don't have to worry if they're going to see their kids tomorrow. And so they became more and more and more and more aggressive and risk-taking to a point that it was really scary. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, if AI becomes its own kind of sentient being or something along those lines, a species, it's not limited by the scope that we are as humans. That it's just going to make us look kind of, I don't know. We're just going to be like those monkeys on Planet of the Apes.
It's funny. There is a school of thought that kind of says if AI gets smarter than we are, then it stands to reason that we'll be subjugated to it, right? There aren't very many examples of where the smartest species isn't in charge, not historically. And there aren't very many examples where the species in charge didn't really become in charge, right? Like start to, when the Europeans came to the North America, they didn't say, okay, American Indians, you go hang out here, we'll go hang out here. We don't, we don't have any ambitions of owning all this land. Mm-hmm. And so that's one school of thought, is that the AIs will be smarter than people. I'm a little skeptical of that, but I do believe that there are still real issues to think about. I'm much more worried about what humans with AI will do to each other. And your example of military weapons, or deep fakes, or I think that AI is so empowering that some people will use it for a type of empowerment that's not good for humanity. Yeah. And that's the thing on the horizon that I get the most nervous about. It would be, what happens if you can't tell, let's say some future show, you can't tell if I'm who I say I am or if I'm a deep fake. That could affect politics. It could affect diplomacy. It could affect war and peace. Lots of different things. And so that's a little bit scary.
Yeah. We just saw, I think we're going to see more of it this election cycle, but I think there was a Biden video that was running around that was fake. One of the things we talked about, I think with either that author or another author, is how we really shouldn't connect AI to weapon systems because, if it decides to launch a missile one time without the checks and balances of human, who knows where we're at. And of course, we're competing with China and Russia, who, Russia's probably dumb enough to hook up AI to its weapon systems, and then where are you? So it's going to be an insane world, really. And it'll be interesting to see, how you can pick the next future Twitters and Lyfts and Ubers and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the argument that I am more attracted to is that AI is going to create lots of different types of intelligences, rather than one omniscient being, say, that knows more than everybody combined. It's more like already, if I use a calculator, it can calculate numbers faster than I can by a wide margin. And so the way I look at it is, I think we're going to have more cognitively intelligent, dedicated purpose tools that will be valuable. But I think that what we're going to discover is that that's the better way to go about it in terms of solving problems, is to not try to have one all-knowing AI system, but instead to try to apply the tools to where they can have the biggest impact with the least resistance.
There you go. Final thoughts as we go out, and tell people where to pick up the book on pattern breakers.
So I have a couple. The first is, one of the things I've seen in these pattern breaking ideas, and I think this will be interesting for some of your viewers, is that it's actually a good thing if most people don't like it at first. Like, when you think about it, human beings are conditioned to like things. And so if everybody likes your idea, it's too much like what they've already seen, which means it's too incremental. And so the best startup ideas have a bunch of naysayers or a bunch of people who kind of don't care, maybe even people who are hostile, and then a tiny number of people who say, oh my God, where have you been my whole life? Let's go co-create the future together. Or, I'm super jazzed about this idea. And so why does that matter, right? Somebody in your audience might have a startup right now, and they may be hearing that's a stupid idea. And that doesn't mean it isn't. But it doesn't mean it is either, right? Like, just because people don't like your idea doesn't make you wrong. And in fact, if you're going to achieve a great breakthrough in this world, you're going to have naysayers. It's true in every field. It was, Copernicus was under house arrest for saying that the Earth orbited the sun, right? And the Catholic Church wouldn't agree with him for another 200 years. And so all of these great ideas that seem obvious now started out as a heresy. And the person who was promoting the idea and trying to change the future had to overcome the inertia of the present fighting back and not fighting back fair and not wanting to see them succeed. And so I always like to say to founders that don't give up because people don't agree with your idea. It's if your insight is valid, that comes with the territory.
There you go. This is why I eat Doritos in bed, because it's the future.
Maybe your future.
Cheeto dust. Cheeto dust is the future. Cheeto dust beds coming to a bed near you. You can get them with the Airbnb Uber sleep in a car. In fact, those are the best place to get Cheeto dust, is sleeping in a car, because you just fall asleep as you're eating those Cheetos, and you get the best dreams. Anyway.
So speaking of Cheetos, kind of the other idea that I think people might find interesting is that when it comes to startups, better doesn't matter. So you have to force a choice and not a comparison. Startups lose when they get compared. So, for example, if you like, say, Cheetos, I can't sell a 10 times better Cheeto to you as a startup. What I need to do is I need to show up with something totally different. I might say, okay, I'm a fruit roll-up, and it's, you may not value the advantage of a fruit roll-up, but you're never going to say, how does that compare to a Cheeto? And so what you want to do is you want to say, when you're a startup, you want to force a choice and not a comparison. And you want to say, look, you may not even value the thing I have, but for the small set of people who do, I'm the only person that has it. And so we want to find the people who value our advantage, and we don't want to allow ourselves to be compared to what's come before. We want to be radically different enough that they can't unsee it once they see it.
There you go. Mike, it's been fun to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, my best place is I'm still a Twitter home team guy at M2JR on Twitter. or I have patternbreakers.substack.com is where I talk about some of these ideas. If people want to get kind of a preview of some of the ideas of the book or just my other meanderings.
There you go. There you go. Mike, it's been fun to have you on. We've talked about a lot of stuff and covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's great to meet you.
There you go. Pleasure to meet you as well, sir. Order up the book, folks. Wherever fine books are sold, stay away from those alleyway bookstores because you might get Cheeto dust on you. It's called Pattern Breakers, Why Some Startups Change the Future, out July 9th, 2024. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one of the TikTokity and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.